In this episode, we want to deepen the knowledge that we brought to the previous episode on establishing coherence and visions across school systems. In that episode, we unpacked some research. We referenced a few articles, some resources that we've been finding useful and sharing with our district improvement partners or schools that we support on improvement processing. And we unpacked the idea that fragmentation is often existing in our school system, and we have to overcome that. We're working on too many things. We're focused on not enough priority on the right things, and that fragmentation has caused our system to just have so much out here that it's impossible for us to actually make sustainable improvement. So we talked about a recommendation to get more narrow, obviously to create a vision of high quality instruction, but then understand the coherence of that vision, because that coherence is what actually can create our improvement and understanding what we mean when we say one thing versus another. But we want to continue this conversation with this case study that we started that episode with. Yvette, let's dig in.
Okay, so just a reminder to everybody, the call that had us questioning maybe some next steps or some changes for the future was that this school team that has 4 leads that are part of the school level math leadership team are striving toward improvement around mathematical fluency for students. They've identified a milestone that they want to hit by the end of this year, which is the implementation of what they're describing as fluency routines 3 times a week in all classrooms. But when we started to ask, what do you mean by fluency? What is a fluency routine? How would you describe it? If I was to walk into your classroom 6 months from now, what should I see, hear, feel during these fluency routines? And the 4 leaders at the table all had very drastically different interpretations of what they meant by fluency. Are they talking fact fluency, conceptual fluency, procedural fluency? What do they define fluency as? But then also even what should we see happening in classrooms was drastically different. Like some were talking about time tests on every Friday, and posting students' results because students are competitive and so they want to see how fast they were at solving these problems. One was talking about working through the facts systematically and checking off when students have their zeros, have their ones, have their twos, have their 3. One teacher was talking about what they do in small group around fluency and how students are steering there was a varied response to that question that led me to believe that perhaps, although there was a vision on the paper, there was an objective identified, there was a milestone that to me was realistic and made sense, that it wasn't really clear what outcome they were hoping for.
Right. I think it's really easy, and it's not shocking to me. This isn't the first time that we've had this experience, right? When you got off that call, it wasn't the first time that we ran into a scenario where, the actual understanding or the meaning behind some of the words we were using varied across different groups. We've experienced it in our own experience at our district, our former district, and we see it quite often. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we experience, not just in education, but other aspects of life. When we're in conversation and we say certain things, we assume other people have the exact same definition. And it is very, very nuanced, especially in the math classroom, to get very clear on that. So I guess the question then becomes what are the next steps, and what are we hashing out here in order to help this group so that they can become less fragmented and more clear on what it means, so that we can, instead of going from, I'm going to call it a 30,000 foot view of what fluency might be, to more of ground level. How do we get to ground level to say if we are seeing a change in fluency, we can actually notice and name some of the different things we're seeing so that we can identify them and we can feel good about them. Or if we're not seeing those things, that we can make some tweaks along the way in order to try to start seeing some of those results that we're actually after.
Yeah. And I want to get into those next steps specifically, but I think what we all battle in education, specifically in the leadership level, is this curse of knowledge, right? We know what we know, and we assume other people know when we say it. Because I think that's what you're saying, Kyle, is that we make this assumption that when I say fluency, you understand what I mean. But that's not the case. You've got a completely different image in your mind of what that looks like. And this is what this team is battling, right? Like they made the assumption, and everyone at the team made the assumption, like, yeah, we're talking fluency. I've made the assumption that the word means the same, or the term, or the actions, the processes, the practice means the same everywhere. So even if I said, like, I'm building resiliency in math class, like, everyone in your group is also going to have a different version of what that means to them. And it doesn't look the same in one class versus the other. You know, it doesn't look the same. That's why it's being different. Like, that's why that teacher's teaching the way that it is, because they think they're doing it when you start to say it. So even take this a little step further, Yvette, is like thinking about, like, when I'm delivering professional development across the system, and I'm making that assumption that I'm talking about, like, we're doing this because we're trying to build resiliency, or this is the reason we do this to build resiliency. But the teacher's like, I do that. I build resiliency every day. I show kids how to solve problems by walking them step by step through this process. Like, that's like, I'm showing them how to be resilient, but am I? Right? Like, our definitions of resiliency are different, but we just make the assumption. So what actually happens at PD sessions, or when teachers are hearing it, when they hear the word, they tune out sometimes. They're like, I'm good at that already.
You want a word that came to mind, John, when you talked about resilience? The word that is so misaligned on is rigor. When we say rigor, we say it in education all the time. What does being rigorous mean? I know what it means in a lot of classrooms. It means torturing children with a lot of things to do, but not necessarily making it what I would deem as being rigorous, right? So it's like, these are so common, and there's so many terms that have such a depth of what possibly, the meaning could be, that, I think as we do some of this work and we unpack what we're after, some of the work we do around monitoring can also be really helpful, because when we actually go to monitor, we have to identify, like, what changes do we want to see? And in some ways that might bring you all the way back to the beginning, and you might recognize that maybe you're not all 100% clear and coherent on some of those things. Like, when I'm looking for a certain thing to take place in my classroom, but that's not what you're looking for, I've now identified that, oh, shoot, we thought we were coherent, but maybe we're not.
I'm going to share the recommendations, the immediate next steps that I shared with this team. But I think that more importantly, what it made me question was the system that this team is a part of. And so my recommendations specifically for the team were, I think it would be great if as a team, we could have a more common definition of what we mean when we say we want to increase student fluency and we want to support the implementation of fluency routines. So my recommendation to them was do a book study around figuring out fluency from Jennifer Bay Williams and John Sangiovanni, so that as a core team, you can land on a more common definition of the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And I said, even, the summit's coming up. Jennifer Bay Williams is going to be a speaker at the summer. I know she's specifically talking about interventions for students who are struggling with fluency. There's sometimes too much choice when it comes to conferences, but maybe that's the one session you agree to attend, or you watch the replay during an upcoming leadership team meeting. So, let's try to, as a team, get more in alignment around what it is we're hoping the outcome is. What do we want for students long term, but also what change do we want to see in our classrooms in the short term? But that to me was the smaller dilemma. To me, the bigger dilemma was, this is a school that's part of a system. And how is the system creating this fragmentation, possibly without, not intentionally, but how could we maybe enhance the system to lead to more coherence? And so this is what I wondered. In this particular system, there's a lot of autonomy at the school level as far as the direction or the outcome they're hoping for, which is great. We want autonomy. But because maybe they're too high on the autonomy end, perhaps there are missed opportunities for this system to work together to really work toward an outcome of increasing student fluency collectively. And so I'm going to share with you an example of a system that is working toward this. So imagine that at the state level, the national level, the provincial level, you decide that you are committed to increasing student fluency, that's an outcome that you want for all learners. That's the state level then, has to provide assessments that reflect that. So if you have state level assessments of math achievement, You need to select an assessment that's going to truly measure fluency, which means that you need to understand what you mean by fluency. And you need to be able to clearly communicate that to the other levels of this system. So from the state level all the way down to the classroom, the assessment that we use to determine change or to measure impact on student achievement around fluency should reflect our common understanding of what we mean by fluency. The instructional materials that we offer educators, as far as, here's a list of approved resources either at the district level or the state level or the provincial level, should include high quality materials that support strong research-based fluency routines, because we all have a common understanding of what we mean by fluency. And so I think sometimes when we have these really autonomous school level goals that are not part of a coherent system, where the assessment, the instructional materials, the professional development all reflect this shared understanding of the outcome we want for students as far as our definition, a true definition of what we mean by fluency. Do we have a common understanding? Like, are we leaning towards the Jennifer Bay Williams, John Sangiovanni interpretation of fluency as efficiency, accuracy, flexibility? Are we looking for automaticity of basic facts? Are we looking for memorization? Are we looking for a variety of strategies when students are demonstrating computational fluency? Are we looking for the standard algorithm? These are drastically different approaches. And if in one classroom we're defining fluency as memorization and proficient with the standard algorithm, in another classroom we're defining fluency as automaticity of basic facts and flexibility of strategy, we no longer have a coherent system. And we're likely going to be very fragmented. We're not going to see sustainable change over time if we're not at all three levels working toward the same moral outcome, which is, of course, we want our students to be able to flexibly, accurately, and efficiently work with all four operators for the purpose of problem solving.
You mentioned, what popped into my mind is the idea around, oftentimes in systems and districts where there's many schools, they want to give that autonomy out, which is important to have some autonomy, but without enough clarity as to what you can do with that autonomy. So, for example, you're doing a school-based plan, and sometimes it almost feels as though some of the schools are trying to be as creative as possible in terms of like what their school improvement plan looks and sounds like, instead of going, no, we're going to do these specific things to help us get closer to that common goal of fluency. And we're going to do it through these things. And if we were to look at all the different school-based plans, they should all, like, you should almost be able to interchange. Like, if you were to take one idea and put it in a different building, we should be able to flip-flop these ideas around, and they should all still be helping you get towards that more common goal, instead of something that's a lot more broad and a lot more vague. So in my mind, I wonder as well, when we get clear, it doesn't necessarily remove autonomy, but rather it allows your autonomy to be more focused, but still differentiated enough so that you can do it within your means in your own context.
Right. Like you're saying, the what is defined, but the how isn't. So we can leave it to the school sites to figure out how, but we're all working towards this. If we're all working towards that, and you've got a great idea, but also we have this shared understanding, because we've done work there to make sure that we have a shared coherent understanding of what that looks like, sounds like, feels like, then hey, it's a perfect condition for now you to figure out the how to get there. Like, think about that at the school level, like even at this school level, right? It's like, if we had a shared understanding across that, then you no doubt trust so many teachers to start moving towards the right things to choose for their classrooms if they're making choices, because you want teachers to have autonomy. But you're like, I completely trust it because I know that you and I have the same definition of fluency. So you're going to make appropriate choices to get there. So it trickles, like it's fractal at the school level to the to the district level, because you who are leading that work understand and have assessed in a way the people you're supporting, that we have this common understanding, this coherence. Because when you have it, you're like, go forth. It's almost like, as a parent, you're like, I don't trust my kid to like walk, be out after dark. What happens if they make this decision or this decision or this decision? It's probably because you don't have enough evidence that supports yet that they have made good decisions and they have the same understanding about values as yourself. When you're like, I know they have the same values that I'm having, or I know that those values mean this, you completely trust your child. to go out and like live life because they're going to make good choices. This is what we want at any fractal level of a system.
Yeah.
So our recommendation, I guess, today is not very different from what we shared on the Monday episode this week, which is essentially at the end of the day, whether you only can control the school level. So you're a teacher right now listening to this episode and you're like, well, I can't control what the district is doing. I can't control what the province or state is doing. Within your own system, do you have a common understanding of the student outcome that you're striving for? Then zoom out. If you're a superintendent listening, if you are a district coordinator listening, does your system have a common understanding of the outcome that you're striving for? And are you working as a system? At the district level, are you doing what is necessary to ensure that teachers have what they need, get the learning that is required, the resources aligned? Like, that's where we get disconnect, is when we say that we value one thing, but then we have a district-wide assessment that values something else. Like, that fragmentation is going to be it's a wrong driver, right? It's something that's going to actually prevent change rather than support it. So at whatever level you are, supporting right now, how are you contributing to this systemness? How are you ensuring that others see themselves in this change and that you're engaging in deep learning together for a moral purpose? And then the one that we're describing now is like, of course, we want all students to have the skills, have the understanding, have the confidence to engage flexibly with all four operators, of course. And what are we going to do to ensure that?
How I'm going to interpret that as like something that could be actionable regardless of the position you're in. So you are working with 4 leaders who are working towards clarifying their district vision. But when they become clear on those 4, I want you, if you're a teacher, you might have 3 colleagues that are working in your grade band that you can become clear together on. So whoever's in your direct network, you can gain that clarity at your level. And then the goal there is that, say it's 4 people, you and 3 other people, and now whoever they're sort of impacting or they're connected to, this is the fractal idea John's talking about. If we get clear as a group of 4, and then I go off and I'm working with my students, or I'm working with different groups of students, or I'm working with different colleagues, I can help them to also become clear, just like the other 3 that are a part of our group. And as we do that, that compounding effect does happen. Now, at the district level, we've got a big job to build that coherence. But within the system, we need everybody being a part of that work, which also means gaining your own understanding and getting clear on what these ideas mean. And then here's the other piece: is it's okay to ask questions when you're not clear, right? Asking questions is how we can highlight that maybe there is a lack of clarity across a group or a subsystem of the actual district.
We do this. This is the work that we do. So if you're saying like this all makes sense, but I'm not sure exactly how, then reach out to us. makemathmoments.com/discovery. Hop on a call with us. We guide teams, support teams, give them resources, feedback, ideas, suggestions, consultation to create this type of operating system inside their school system, at whatever level that happens to be. So reach out to us again at makemathmoments.com/discovery, and we can talk about what that support looks like to you so that you can create this in your system.